Welcome to the Dream Life is Real Life podcast with your host, Hannah Hermanson, bringing you real life stories of people who realized their dreams to educate and inspire you to create your legacy of abundance now.
Welcome back, everyone. Hannah here, and today I am speaking with Heather Krakora. Heather has been telling other stories through graphic design, art, and photography for over 20 years. But beginning 5 years ago, Heather's life transitioned into something unrecognizable. Somewhere in between a personal health crisis, her son's abuse at school, and her mother's death, she discovered the power of creative self-care as a powerful way to help her move through grief. This period of awakening helped Heather to realize that to achieve true and effective change for her entire family, they needed to start fresh with their lives. So in July of 2017, exactly a year ago from recording here, they sold most of what they owned and relocated from Madison, Wisconsin to Berkeley, California. Now Heather's work as a creative life catalyst is dedicated to guiding others on how to use a creative practice to help themselves through life's major transitions. During this process, her clients acknowledge their grief and then rise in their resilience. Wow. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I am great, and you know I resonate with just a bit of your story, relocating from Madison to Berkeley. So super excited to dive more into your story here.
I'm super excited too. Yeah, no, Madison's a great place, but I have to say California is much better.
Yeah. So just hearing so much about your personal story here in the bio, the intro we just read, that's a lot to take on in a lifetime, much less in the span of less than 5 years. So a personal health crisis, parenting dilemmas, your son being abused at school, your mother passing, how does one pick up their entire family and relocate as you did?
Sometimes, honestly, I think we just felt like we had no other choice. My husband and I, we were just kind of looking at each other one day in February. It was like a cold morning. And it wasn't that long ago. It was February 2017. And we're just like, we were so tired of just feeling like life was happening to us. We felt like we were always on the receiving end of life. And we didn't want that to be how our lives worked. We wanted to be the ones happening to life, if that makes sense. We wanted to take it by the horns and just say, this is our life. We are not victims here. And we just felt so stuck where we were and a little scared. And we're like, let's just mix it up because this just doesn't feel good anymore. So we'd always wanted to live on the West Coast. And we're like, let's go. So.
That's amazing. I know for myself and lots of people that I know and listening to this have had those experiences of feeling stuck. And to just decide is so powerful to say, all right, we're going to just choose a different story. Or for me, it was, I'm just going to quit my job. And so was everything just dream life after that decision? Or was there more of a process to that transition for you guys?
That's a really good question. I think a little bit of both. I think once you make that decision, or once we made that decision, it was just like this light going off of like, yes, finally something feels good. This feels really right. But I don't want to, it's also moving a family of 4 with teenagers is complicated. It's not like you could just throw everything in a U-Haul. We owned a house. We had a photography studio in our backyard. So it was like, we didn't just have like a house. We had multiple properties. We had to sell that. We had to get everything ready to do and sell and move. That was logistically, it was kind of a nightmare. Making sure where exactly were we going to move once we got to California. We knew the Bay Area, but I had to research schools, look at like, how is the healthcare? There was a lot, but it was also just making that decision. We felt so much lighter, so much lighter. But I think
Yes.
people also thought we were crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I hear it
Yeah.
in so many stories, including yours, this like pivotal moment of like, okay, like we said, redefine the story, make the decision. We're going to do something different. And it's going to not be easy, but you have to kind of embrace that, if I keep doing what I'm doing, what is that going to get me? And that pain or that challenge of changing is almost always worth it in the stories that I hear. And so, of course, like logistics come up when you make a big life change or you start a business or you quit a job. But when you ask yourself, like, what is the alternative? Like, would I rather be researching healthcare in this new state, or would I rather be, sticking to the old story? Was that something you considered?
Yeah. No. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I basically, to add to the story, so we lived next door to my parents. And my mom, and we were very close to my parents. My mom was my best friend. My kids would go over there all the time. We shared a driveway. So it was just kind of, hopping around the driveway, going over to Oma and Opa's and hanging out. And once my mom died, she's no longer there. So that was hit number one. And then, my dad, he was in this big house on an acre of land all by himself. It was a lot for him to take care of. I mean, he's not old by any sense of the mean. He was early 60s, but it was a lot. And he couldn't maintain it anymore. He didn't want to. It was too much of a memory of my mother. So he he ended up within a year remarried and moved to St. Paul. So all of a sudden, and he sold his house. So all of a sudden, this home, which I actually liked more than my own home, was inhabited by strangers. And I was still very much grieving my mom and looking over at that house, not being able to go over there and sit in this space where I felt close with her. It was very painful. And I honestly don't know how I would feel right now still living next door to it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still grieving. I think I will always grieve my mother, but having that constant reminder, I just couldn't continue that way. And it was not a good place to be and not a good pattern to be. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. I think you realized this was the only choice, was to make something different, because being in pain and, just kind of dwelling in your grief wasn't an option for you or your family. And I think recognizing that and leaning into whatever other discomfort may have presented itself is something that a lot of people could probably relate to. It's like, which discomfort do you choose? Is it the discomfort of growing and evolving, or is the discomfort of staying where you're at sometimes?
Yeah. And a lot of people actually, because a few of our close friends were like, well, why don't you just move within Madison? I'm like, nope, it's got to be drastic. And I think sometimes our lives require a drastic change. Like you need to make a complete circle and turn yourself upside down a little bit so that you can get right side up, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes. I've experienced that a bit myself. So I want to dive into a little bit more. You've used the word grief a few times, and it was mentioned as something you help your clients do. So can you help us just even define what grief is? Because I'm not sure I have a very compassionate definition or an all-encompassing definition for myself. So how do you define grief?
Grief for me, and from what I'm finding for a lot of people, isn't necessarily something you experience only when somebody dies. You experience grief also during any sort of major life transition. It's a way of like, you have to say goodbye to even old habits, old friends. I'm trying to think, like if you leave your job, some people will experience some sort of grief. Like they will maybe get depressed or feel really down, or just this like something's missing. Like what's missing? I'm not going and having coffee with the same people anymore. Like you are going to miss that. So that can be grief. moving. There's grief associated with moving. Things that you are so used to having every day are all of a sudden not there. And how do you cope with that? And how do you find new things to either replace it or, just to move on to? And then ultimately the grief when somebody dies is obviously going to be way more intense, but it's just this period. Actually, I can't even say it's a period because grief has no timeline, of just, you get very introspective. You can be angry, you could be sad, you could be happy. It's a really emotionally complicated time. And yeah.
I'm glad you said that, sort of complicated or complex, and that it can look so different even within the same person, and that like grieving a job loss or grieving a transition or grieving a person can manifest itself in a lot of different ways for different people, yes, but even within ourselves. So for someone that experienced a lot of challenges, a lot of transitions within such a short amount of time, how do you move through that? Or what strategies do you recommend or help people with now to make the most of grief? Or like you said, it's not something that has a timeline. So help us move through this grief. What do you recommend?
What I draw upon, I have a really solid mindfulness practice that I've been doing for about 8 years, and where self-care is a really important part of it. And self-care for me is more of a creative process. I shouldn't say I've never, but I'm not, like, working out is not self-care for me. I don't consider that something that brings me great joy. But self-care for me is more artistic and creative. I love drawing. It started for me, I ended up focusing on mindful, like, words that were really resonated with me at that moment. So like maybe I needed one of the words that I remember very vividly writing on as well as drawing was surrender. I just needed to let go of certain expectations that I put upon myself and I felt like society had put upon me and my family. And that was a word I would draw frequently. But just taking that time to draw or paint really allowed my mind to shut down. It's like meditation for me. In fact, it is meditation. I will very much enter this state where, like, somebody can come up to me and start talking to me and I'll have no idea because I'm just deep in this inner space. And that has helped me get through most of my challenging times, quite honestly.
Wow. I think that's so important for anyone listening, whether they love working out or they're an artist or they have no concept of self-care, is that, like, giving yourself permission to let self-care mean what it needs to mean to you. I definitely have been someone who's gotten really caught up in, like, well, I have to go to yoga more, or I just have to run farther, or take a bubble bath, right? These prescriptions of what self-care should be haven't always resonated with me. And so I love that you use your creativity, art, journaling, but also now help other people find what are those things that are going to actually be filling up our cups, as opposed to just, okay, self-care, checking it off. So for you, you knew art and you found, like, spaces of meditation and creativity for yourself. And so with your clients or with people listening, what are some just sort of starter steps to start exploring what is actually self-care for ourselves?
Well, I like to brainstorm. I'm a huge fan of brainstorming. Like, what are the things that bring you joy? So it's not, we are creative beings, right? So creating doesn't necessarily need to be like art. Some people, like, maybe it's dance, maybe it's singing, playing an instrument, some sort of, like baking. That was a huge thing. So I have people brainstorm ideas of, like, what brings you joy. I also am a huge fan of the 5 love languages. Because I feel like during this whole process, you also need to celebrate yourself. And what are the ways that you celebrate yourself and show yourself love? For me, it's quality time. And so I think that's why like creative self-care works really well for me, because that's quality time with myself. And most of my clients, that's one of their main love languages is quality time.
Fascinating.
So that's another way. Yeah. Yeah. Also journal, and like, did you want me to go through every single step, or is that a good start?
Well, I think I just personally gleaned a little gem for myself as a starter step, because I've done the love languages with roommates, with partners, and I've never done it with myself. And I think that's, I'm just having a moment here of like that loving yourself, like needs, like treat yourself how you want others to treat you kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my love languages is quality time. And so for both of us, and it sounds like a lot of other people, just spending time with yourself and not having it be, that's great. So I just wanted to call that out as something for people to look into. I can add something for folks to go find the love languages test. If you haven't taken it, just go take it for yourself now. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And so once we start to identify some ways that we can love on ourselves, or the things that, really fill up our cup, whether it's quality time, acts of service, touch, some of those 5 love languages things, how do we move into those spaces, even if we're feeling down or we're in a period of grief?
Yeah, that's so hard. And really, it's creating the habit and knowing that you're doing something that is good for you. So I help people by just, I actually, for myself, I did a 100-day project. It's actually a thing that you could look at the hashtag online. It's just hashtag the 100-day project. And it was started by an artist named Ella Luna. I can't quite remember. I'm sorry for butchering that, but it is a fascinating project. And the main platform for it is on Instagram. And I basically, for 100 days, as much in a row as I could at the time, I watercolored circles using 4 ink colors. And it was creating that habit through, and then using the accountability of just the internet, of saying on Instagram, I am going to be a part of this project, follow along. And I automatically became part of this community. And I just, every day I would take a photo of it, post it on my Instagram feed. And it wasn't just this 100-day project that I started off with, just thinking I was going to do a project. It ended up being so emotional for me, because I did this after my mom died. I worked through a lot of stuff, just letting go of the watercolors and watching them flow into each other. It was so meditative. But really, it was that 100-day project, that just knowing that I had to do it every day. And some days, I wasn't able to do it. And I had to be kind to myself. Some days were just really hard. But for the most part, I did finish it. And it created a really great habit for me. It was just, you have an accountability partner of the internet at that moment. That's what helped me. And then also some people cheering me on.
Wow. Again, so much within just that experience you had of, okay, you found something that you could create a habit around that was going to fill your cup up, that was going to get you in that meditative state. And then you found the accountability and the community to help you show up. And I think that no matter what you're trying to achieve, whether it's transitioning, out of a job, or it's grieving the loss of a loved one, finding those daily things that can get you a little bit closer to your dream life, or to, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. I think the power of habit, community, and accountability are priceless, really. And
No. And I think important for people to remember with habit is it takes a while. I mean, you have to give yourself, I think it's at least 2 weeks, and you're going to have so much resistance with it, but it's like, stick with it, because that's how major change happens in your life, is through these new habits.
Yeah. Yes, I love this. And you're such a testament to that, to go through, we didn't even really get into the personal health crisis and the challenges your kiddos were facing all at one time, and to, not necessarily compare to Heather's story, but to use it as a testament that like it is possible to make big life changes, to overcome devastation, and then to turn around and help others move through, I think is so inspiring. That now you've taken your story and your experiences and you're helping others grapple with challenge and grief. So I so appreciate the parts of your story that we've shared. And I know there's so much more. We could talk for hours here. But we are sort of reaching the phase of the show I like to call a pop quiz. You're creative. I know you can think on your feet, so don't be nervous. But the first question I like to ask all of the guests is, what is one thing that we can do today to get us closer to, dream life or happiness or the goals that we're yearning for? What's an action we can take today?
Oh, that's a good question. Try something new, try something different. Get outside of your comfort zone. If you don't normally draw, just pick up a pencil and just start doodling. Maybe take 10, 15 minutes and then do it every day, just for a week. See how it feels.
I would love to see everyone's doodles for a week. If you're doodling after this episode, send us a little, Instagram or something like that. Cause I think that there are just, like you said, like something a little bit different for a couple of minutes a day. Step outside of that comfort zone and practicing just by doodling or, taking a different route to work. Like you're actively preparing yourself for bigger changes and bigger newness. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Question number 2 is, what's a tangible resource that you would recommend that listeners get their hands on?
Oh, it's hard to narrow this one down, but I am such a fan of Brené Brown. She has gotten me through just about everything. Her book, Daring Greatly, is my favorite.
Daring Greatly. You there's something about you that reminds me of Brené. Maybe you've emulated so much of her work that you're definitely exuding it. So
I was in an airport once and somebody came up to me and asked me if I was Brené Brown.
Wow.
Which I was like, I don't know if I look that much like her, but okay, I'll take it.
There's something about your energy. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a high compliment. Yes, exactly. Awesome, Heather. So the third question is, how can people learn more about you and get connected with the work that you do?
This is awesome. So I have a website and it's called inspirecreatebe.com. And I have a blog, which I'm currently filling up with great posts about grief and creativity and mental health, you name it. I have a lot of passions. You can find me on Instagram, just at Heather Krakora. So just Heather and then Krakora, that's Krakora. And I'm pretty active on Instagram. And then I also,
I love your feed. Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your Instagram is so good. I love your feed. Yeah.
Thank you. And then for people that listen to your podcast, I have a freebie of 5 ways to get out of your head and unstuck and moving into action. And you can get that at www.inspirecreatebe.com/dreamlife.
Oh my gosh. I feel like just typing that in is going to put good energy into you. inspirecreatebe.com/dreamlife. Like, this is great stuff. If even just typing it into your computer doesn't give you good vibes, what is going to be waiting on the other side of that browser, people? Amazing. Heather, any final, words of wisdom or little nuggets you'd like to leave listeners with who might be resonating with the work you do or your story today?
just keep your head up. I think a lot of us go through these periods that are just so hard, and just remember that you are not alone. Sometimes I think in the thick of it, we feel so devastatingly lonely, but in reality, we aren't. There are a lot of people out there that are fighting for us and waiting to cheer us on, and we just need to be present enough to accept that help. So that's my big one. And then to remember, you do have control of it. You do have a choice. And I actually have this tattooed on my arm, choose joy, because we do have a choice. And just be mindful, and and
Choose
ready and willing.
Joy. Yes. Choose joy. And remember, you are not alone. Listeners, please go reach out to Heather if any of this resonated with you, or you just want, another chit chat with someone as inspiring and as amazing as Heather. I will be back next week, and we will continue these conversations to help you make your dream life your real life. Thanks again, Heather.
Thank you.
You've been learning how to make your dream life your real life with Hannah Hermanson. To get the resources mentioned on today's show and to listen to past episodes, visit www.dreamlifeisreallife.com.